Hi, everybody. This is Slava Kurilyak. I am super excited to kick off today's live stream featuring the topic of venture capital and AI technologies. This is an amazing field to dive right in, and I want to welcome you to our live stream. This broadcast is being multi-streamed to several platforms, including LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, OK, Twitch, VK, etc. If you are joining us now, I want to welcome you, and I will first do a brief introduction of myself, and I would then dive deeper into the topic of venture capital and how venture capital can leverage AI technologies. For those who are not familiar, I am the founder, CEO at Produvia, where my team and I, for the last 8 years, that's coming up to close to 10 years, we have helped companies around the world to scale faster by developing AI technologies. And this is a field that has fascinated me for nearly a decade, and AI technologies are what I think about and what I help companies to implement. And this is the foundation of today's talk, which is how can venture capital or specific individuals within the venture capital industry leverage the technology that is readily available for anyone to use. And that is the discussion that we will have today. If you're interested to play back during sort of after this event, feel free to rewind and watch this live stream. This live stream is meant to be interactive. This live stream is meant to educate, inspire, and share best practices for how entrepreneurs, executives, and decision makers can use AI technology to solve real problems and to scale their business. I also want to encourage everyone who is here to jump in, raise your hand, and come up to the speaker panel. And you can do that by going to the link below, which is go.produvia.com/subscribe. So now type that in for everyone who is joining us. Subscribe. And you will see now this link appear in the chat section, and feel free to do that. And I encourage you to click on the link and actually jump into this conversation. And in the meanwhile, I will continue this discussion, and I am more than happy to kick things off. So for now, I'm just going to do a quick check to make sure everything is working as expected, and everyone will be able to jump in if they want to make a comment, if they want to have if they have a question, or if they're interested to chat in general about these technologies. And I think a good starting point for us is to discuss what is venture capital. I think that's a good place to start. Venture capital is the capital that is often invested in companies. This capital is invested with the result of generating revenue. So companies such as venture capital or angel investors are often seeking where they should invest next, and being able to answer these questions allows them to generate money. And ultimately, investments are poured where there is sort of interest to generate capital. Now, this particular live stream is focusing on how individuals and companies can use AI technologies to leverage these technologies and apply them towards solving problems. So for that reason, I encourage you to think about what problems do you face on a day-to-day basis? What frustrations do you face? This is an opportunity for you to think about, from the problem or challenge perspective, what is sort of on your mind. And once you've defined the challenge, once you've defined the frustration or the problem, now you're open to the possibility of how you can solve that problem. And AI technology is one of these tools. So I encourage you to think about the problem space first, and then I encourage you to think about how you can solve the problem. And hopefully this broadcast will give you ideas, and it will inspire you to use AI technology to solve venture capital problems. This live stream also is meant to be interactive. So if you are joining us, I welcome you. If you want to come up and leave a comment in the section below or to your right, it depends where you're joining from. I encourage you to do that as well. So let's move forward with this particular event. Hedge funds is a fascinating domain. The goal ultimately is to generate revenue, but we see many similar goals that are just as important. So everything from reducing costs and to saving time, right? So if we think about a typical investor and they want to find the next unicorn idea or unicorn team or company, they're often asking themselves, what does that look like? What are the factors that lead up to a person becoming successful in the future? What are the factors that lead a team to execute well? These questions are often on the investors' minds because they sort of set the stage for a future return on investment. Ultimately, venture capital is driven by ROI or return on investment. And so dedicating capital towards projects is definitely a hard decision to make. And at the same time, it is a worthwhile decision to do. You are able to leverage sort of your understanding and put capital towards use. And this is one of the best leverage that the industry has, which is the leverage of capital. So how can you use AI technology from an investment perspective? Let's say you're an investor and you're deciding where to allocate your capital. Well, capital allocation and capital allocation recommendation systems is one of these examples. Being able to recommend where capital should be allocated based on a variety of conditions, based on market changes, based on stock changes and stock trends is the first example I wanted to share with everyone here, which is how you can use AI technology as an investor. Well, you can simply create a system that gives you guidance for where you should invest next. And a recommendation system is the perfect technology for this because we often are dealing with a variety of data sets to figure out where our investment should go. We're looking at perhaps the potential of the team if it's an earlier stage project, or we're looking at the stock performance over time if it's a more later stage and a more public company. So the investment that you pursue will depend on where you are in the sort of startup eco cycle. If you're investing in the early stage startups, you have to look at a variety of factors that are not stock related. If you're investing in a later stage company like an enterprise, there you can use stock as one of the more concrete examples of how you can better predict performance over time. So far I've discussed using recommendation systems to guide investors to make better decisions. However, there are many ways you can go about using AI technology, and it really depends on what problem you're aiming to solve. And if you do have a specific problem that you would like to address, feel free to reach out to me. You can do that by leaving a comment section below or to your right, or you can do that by reaching out to me by text, and I'll send the link, or rather the phone number that you will find in the captions below, and you'll be able to text me as well. So this is a number that you can reach out to me at, and this allows you to actually communicate with me one-on-one. So if any specific problem that you face, I encourage you to reach out. So the second use case of how you can use AI technology, and that is guiding you on a real-time basis on whether you should buy or sell. So this is algorithmic trading. And again, you can also build a recommendation system for what you should do next. But ultimately, if you're doing algorithmic trading, then prediction models are your best bet. You're aiming to predict into the future what is the price of a specific stock or an asset. Being able to predict that stock is today by far one of the best ways to use AI technology, because we already have market data we can analyze. So traditionally, algo traders or algorithmic traders had used statistics to figure out where they should invest their capital, how they should trade. And then as soon as high frequency trading sort of came into the scene, as soon as traders were shifting from sort of swing strategies to day-to-day trading, they realized that the potential was to make decisions in real time, and that's where algorithms and AI technologies came into the scene. Now, this is slight divergence from the traditional investor who may take a long-term view, but the day-to-day trader or the long-term investors are both in a position to use AI technology. And for that reason, it's an essential technology to consider. So let's describe some of the benefits of using AI for either day-to-day trading, high-frequency trading, or more longer-term investments. The biggest benefit, of course, is that you're able to do real-time algorithm. And if you're doing this work, if you're able to make decisions in real time, well, then you're much more competitive than companies who are not doing this. Venture capital is just one source of how you can go about using your capital. You can make investments into later stage companies, including you can buy stock of these companies. So if you are performing algorithmic trading and you do want to leverage real-time algorithmic decision-making, then this is the perfect use case of AI technology. The other example I wanted to share with you is determining what is the sort of the oil to a successful future startup. And this is where we're now sort of touching base on the entrepreneurship side. What makes a successful entrepreneur? What factors are necessary for venture capital to look at before they can invest capital? And today there are many factors that go into the equation of determining successful strategies versus less successful, and it really depends on what is the value of the technology itself, and oftentimes being able to make the correct prediction about an investment opportunity means that later in the future, perhaps 5, perhaps 10 years down the road, you have massive payout. And a unicorn is sort of the best case scenario because it's a company that's able to generate not just millions of dollars, but billions of dollars. And hence the lion's share, if you were to the investor, becomes larger. However, unicorns are not the only investments that are idealized. There are many other investments which are seen as valuable, but they're just less under the radar. They're less public. Those investments are often private companies that are not aiming necessarily to become successful, but they just happen to become successful. So whether they have the intention to become unicorn or they just become a unicorn over time, these companies are definitely worth looking into. And the long tail of investments actually is one of the best reasons for using AI technology, being able to scan and analyze and make judgments based on not just tens, but hundreds, thousands, millions of companies around the world at scale means that anyone can use AI technology without sort of being held back by their own time. And for that reason, AI technologies are extremely powerful. They save time and they're able to analyze more investment opportunities per unit of time. So moving forward to sort of what else is possible in the venture capital space. So if we think about investments, we realize that investments are aiming to predict the future. So investments in a way can be tied to market trends. And this is another way that venture capital can leverage the technology, is that if you're analyzing market trends, if you are performing predictions on those trends or the market conditions, now you can make better decisions in the investment process, which allows you to get more return on investment. So as you spread and become diversified in your investments, as you start to look at different market trends that are happening, you start to leverage AI technologies to help you to achieve the analysis and to help you make predictions. It's very important for anyone who's interested to use the technology. So keep in mind that the technology is agnostic. It's a tool, like any tool can be used for good and bad. So today the investments are sort of happening on the venture capital space, and these investments are used primarily to generate capital. Having said that, you can use the same technology to do something that is, I would say, maleficent, or do something that is from a bad actor's perspective. So I encourage everyone who is interested for sort of the optimistic or altruistic reasons. If you want to generate revenue, you can definitely do that. But I also want to recognize that anyone who has an intention to use the technology must understand that it can be misused as well. So as a foundation for what's possible, now I want to start discussing what are some of the best applications that I've seen for venture capitalists that are able to use AI technologies. And those are the capital sort of focused software that are making predictions of the market trends. Those are software that are giving recommendations to venture capitalists, and this is software that is able to guide the capitalists in their decision-making process. I think that's the best way to augment the investment process. Right? The investment process is extremely challenging. It's extremely dynamic, and being able to leverage machine learning-driven technologies that are empowering venture capitalists is definitely one of the technologies that is being used by companies who want to generate more revenue. And ultimately, if it comes down to competitive advantage, a company that's using machine learning technologies is going to establish that competitive advantage faster than a company who, for example, just uses statistics, or a company that does not use statistics at all, and they're just relying on intuition. And yes, intuition can go a long way, especially when there's not enough data. But as soon as you have market conditions creating the data plume, and as soon as companies recognize that data plume through either directly measuring factors or indirectly sort of figuring things out, then you have the potential to use AI technology to solve problems. And I also want to remind everyone that this live stream will be recorded and will be available for playback at a later time. So I encourage you to pause, reflect, play back, get to any moment in time and extract the most value. And if there's something that you would like to learn more about, I encourage you to reach out and let me know. I'm more than happy to guide you on that process. Moving forward with what else is possible. So we've talked about so far how venture capitalists can use the technology to predict market trends, how they can use the same technology to analyze and make decisions on the trading floor, make algorithmic decisions with either to buy or sell. But there's also a tremendous opportunity in understanding what makes a successful company and what makes a less successful company. What is a good company? What is the difference between a great company and a good company? All these questions can be answered using AI technology. And all you need to do is analyze very unique factors that you think are most suited for future success, right? Whether you perform psychological tests on the founders, physiological tests, or you analyze them indirectly. Perhaps you scan videos of the founders over time and you analyze how they speak, what they speak about, and how their moods change. Perhaps it's through analysis of their body language, their tonality, or what they say. So there's just so many possibilities out there that anyone can use to understand and make predictions about the future of the founders. And coming at the problem from an entrepreneurial perspective, there's just so much variability that must be considered when companies are considering, which person or team is better suited for investments. Figuring out those factors is not easy, but if you do figure out those factors better than your competitor, then you get all the riches, right? You get more rewards faster, and this is often possible because you're starting to use more advanced technologies for data analysis. Let's discuss now and shift a little bit and talk a little bit more about data science. Some of our listeners are familiar with the term, but don't know quite how to get started. And data science actually is a very important field to discuss because it relates to venture capital, and it often is a bridge into the capital space, so the capital markets. Today, you have the foundations of data, and data is sort of the touch point to using any technology. As you're generating data, as you're using data, you often create the environment for more advanced technologies. And one of these technologies is data science. Data science allows companies to leverage data and perform analyses, perform their scientific hypothesis on data, and come up with its sort of evaluations, come up with its own conclusions. Data scientists are often needed to help companies to make sense of data, and oftentimes this is the first touch point to using AI technology. You first get a data scientist, or perhaps a team, or perhaps you reach out to myself and my team, and at Produvia we can help you to make sense of the data you have. So the first point is to perform data science tasks on the data that you begin to collect. And after you realize that there's power and there's potential in data, now you can start to apply modeling that helps you to better understand that data. So perhaps you start with the statistical approach of using data science. Perhaps you are visually understanding what's happening in the marketplace. You're graphing things. You're making sense of data that is graphed visually. And over time, you start to do more complex tasks. You start to perform sort of the modeling processes that you typically find in machine learning or deep learning. You start to ask yourself, how can you use prediction models or classification models to help you to make better sense of the data? And this is how companies will evolve, and they go from data to doing some data analysis, data exploratory work, and then they start to shift to machine learning or deep learning work. This is an excellent bridge that allows companies to start using these technologies, because the progression is sort of focusing on data and then expanding past data, considering all the technologies possible to leverage data and solve problems. Another path that is often common is that companies start with the intention to create innovative solutions or intention to solve problems, and then they sort of reverse engineer, and they figure out that perhaps the data requirements are such that AI technologies is the next best technology to solve the data problem. And here we start with the end in mind, and then we work backwards to figure out that perhaps it's a machine learning model that is performing sort of supervised learning and aiming to help people to make decisions for algorithmic trading. And the second approach, where you start with the end in mind, is also a very valuable path for companies to take. You're not starting with data as if the approach one. You're starting with the goal, and then you work backwards from the goal. You ask yourself, what is the vision that I want to achieve? And then AI technology can be the way you can go about accomplishing that vision. And so far, we've discussed a few major concepts, and I also want to start sort of concluding this live stream. And I want to remind everyone who's joining us today that this is a live stream meant to educate, inspire, and share best practices for how entrepreneurs, decision makers, and executives can use AI technologies to solve business problems. And I encourage everyone who is interested to hear more about these upcoming events. I encourage you to subscribe to Produvia. You can do that by going to the link as shown in the captions below. And now I'll type it in the comment section so you can actually click on it and have the same access. So here's a link that allows you to subscribe. It's going to show up on the bottom or the right-hand side, depending on where you're joining from. And I encourage you to subscribe and be the first to know when we launch our upcoming events. You will receive an email notification of these events. And I also want to start wrapping things up. This particular live stream is part of the broadcast that is being made to LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, OK, VK, and others. And if you're interested, I encourage you to subscribe, and so that you can know about our upcoming events. In the meanwhile, I would like to start concluding things with the fact that venture capitalists today have capital to spend, and they need advice, they need guidance on where to invest that capital. And either whether we're looking at it from the investment perspective, in terms of buying or selling, the assets that venture capitalists deal with are typically financial. And so we're usually referring to how can AI technologies help with financial decision making, and there's just so much possibilities out there. Seeing that financial data oftentimes is numerical data, especially for later stage companies. This becomes an easier justification for using machine learning or deep learning. Whereas if we're looking at earlier stage companies, leveraging a variety of factors in the decision making allows companies to use AI technologies to predict successful future unicorns. That concludes this live stream. I want to welcome everyone who has joined us to date. I also want to thank everyone who's been with us. I also want to conclude that if you're interested to discuss about the specific problem that you want to solve using venture capital or in the venture capital space, if you're an executive or decision maker and you need guidance on how you can use the technology to solve real problems, I encourage you to reach out to me and schedule a brief discovery call where you and I will chat about the specific problem that you're facing, and I will let you know how AI technology can help you. And so you can do that by finding the link below in the comment section or to the right-hand side. And the link is produvia.com/start. Now I will actually type the link, and I encourage everyone to visit it. The link is produvia.com/start. And I think that is an excellent segue to conclude. I want to thank you for being here, and tomorrow I will do another live stream where I take an industry and I dive deeper into how AI technology will help that. I encourage you to visit and come back tomorrow, and I encourage you to subscribe and reach out to me. Thanks very much for your time. This is Slava, and it's been great to have this conversation with you. Bye now.